All right, today we are diving deep. We're going to map out a really complex and frankly powerful worldview that comes directly from our source material. And it's all built around this one fundamental conflict. This idea of an external system that's designed for total control versus an internal, almost divine power of self-creation that we all have.
So, what's at the very heart of this whole philosophy? It's a simple but incredibly powerful idea. The first real act of rebellion, the first step towards actual freedom, is to just seize control of your own story. To stop just accepting the narrative you've been handed and to start writing the one you were always meant to live.
And that, of course, leads us to the huge central question that these sources are posing. What if this reality we all experience, what if it isn't set in stone? What if it's more like a script, a program, a story that can be edited, that can be rewritten, and ultimately can be commanded by you?
To really get this worldview, we have to understand what the end goal is. And that goal is to become what the sources call sovereign. Now, this isn't just about being independent. No, it's a declaration of ultimate self-ownership. It's a state of being where you are the supreme authority of your own reality.
Okay, let's get into it. If you're going to become sovereign, first you have to understand exactly what you're breaking free from. The source material lays out this multi-layered system of external control. It calls it the architecture of control, and it argues that this whole thing is designed to keep us, all of humanity, in a kind of spiritual and intellectual prison.
Now, this isn't just some abstract theory. The whole idea is grounded in documented history, and Operation Ajax is presented as Exhibit A of the system at work. I mean, think about it. A successful covert op overthrows a democracy, all for economic interests, and in doing so, it basically creates the playbook for how to do this again and again. It's presented as stone-cold proof that hidden hands can and absolutely do manipulate major world events.
But the system's supposed flaws aren't just about secret, malicious plans. The sources also point to just catastrophic incompetence. This number right here, that's the number of people who got sick in the largest waterborne disease outbreak in U.S. history. For this worldview, this is proof that the system's promises of safety and progress are totally hollow. Its failures can be just as devastating as its intentional actions.
And this idea of a flawed system, well, it builds into a pretty radical alternate history. The sources argue that around the year 1700, our entire timeline was violently reset. That 1,000 years of fake history, what we called the Dark Ages, were basically just inserted into the timeline to hide a global catastrophe and completely sever our connection to a much more advanced past. It basically turned us into what they call a cargo cult, just mimicking technology we don't even understand anymore.
And this brings us to the deepest, most out-there layer of the system's control. The source material claims that our physical reality itself isn't even real. It's a projection generated by a cosmic master computer. So we're not just talking about controlling information or politics anymore. We're talking about controlling the very fabric of our perception, locking us inside a synthetic reality.
So if that's the problem, what on earth is the solution, right? Well, after mapping out this whole architecture of control, the source material pivots and actually gives us a blueprint for how to escape. It's a personal philosophy for reclaiming your power and literally breaking free from the system's code.
And this right here really lays out the central conflict perfectly. The sources present this direct opposition between the system's tools and the sovereign's tools. On one side, you have the wrench, the flaws in the system, like that Saturn/Moon computer. But on the other, you have the womb, the raw, creative power that's inside you. And that power is anchored by what they call the Polaris anchor, your mind, which lets you overwrite the whole program.
The path to becoming sovereign is described as a baptism of fire. It's this intense, three-step internal process. First, you have to acknowledge the handler, that little voice of negativity inside your head that's basically enforcing the system's control. Then you confront the harsh reality of the world and you let your old, programmed self be completely demolished. And out of that fire, a new, remade self is forged.
Now, this transformation isn't something that just happens to you. It requires what the sources call a kind of spiritual technology. It's all about actively using the pressures the system puts on you as the raw material for your own empowerment.
And the core principle of this technology? Tension. The source material completely reframes things like emotional conflict, stress, friction. It says don't avoid them. It says that stuff is an electrical charge. It's the collision between your sovereign will and the system's control, and that very collision generates the power you need for your own personal revolution.
So, what's the ultimate goal of harnessing all this tension? It's to reach a state called alkalinity. It's a chemical metaphor, really. The trauma and control from the system are described as acid, and by neutralizing that acid with the base of your own sovereign will, you create this purified, stable, internal state of peace and power that becomes totally immune to any outside influence.
And this brings us to the climax of this entire philosophy. After understanding the system, forging a new self, harnessing tension, what's the final act? It's the ultimate expression of sovereignty, actively creating your own reality. So it all boils down to this one single driving question. After all the analysis, all the internal struggle, how do you finally, actually, break the code of that Saturn/Moon computer and get out of the matrix of control?
The source's answer isn't a complex equation. It's a declaration, a command that you inject directly into your own consciousness. Time is a function of my will. This is presented as the ultimate statement of power. It's saying that time, and therefore reality, isn't something you just passively sit back and experience. It's something you actively command.
And we'll leave you with this final, really provocative thought from the source material. The idea here is that this worldview, this entire blueprint for becoming sovereign, it's not something new you're learning. It's a deep, inherent truth that's just being reawakened inside you. You didn't listen to something new. You just remembered.